Project 2025, the controversial roadmap and policy plan for a GOP conservative administration takeover in 2025, under fire again, facing scathing criticism, of course, from Democrats, all while former President Donald Trump has distanced himself from it. In fact, he says he knows nothing about it. But now ProPublica has uncovered 23 videos totaling more than 14 hours of content. Let's take a look at some of those.
If the next Republican president does not execute a dramatic course correction, there may never be another chance. So if you're not on board with helping implement a dramatic course correction because you're afraid it'll damage your future employment prospects, it'll harm you socially, look, I get it. That's a real danger. It's a real thing. But please, do us all a favor and sit this one out.
What do you think about all of about the left's words and definitions in the environment?
It's a great point, Katie. They don't stop. Climate change, allegedly, is everywhere. And if the American people elect a conservative president, his administration will have to eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere.
OIRA is a very small agency, too small actually. It has a staff of about 50. A conservative administration should increase its staffing levels considerably. 50 people are not enough to adequately police the regulatory actions of the entire federal government. OIRA is one of the few government agencies that limits the regulatory ambitions of other agencies.
According to ProPublica, a training video or a review of these training videos reveals that 29 of 36 speakers have worked for Trump in some capacity, either on his transitions team while he was president or in the current campaign. The videos were recorded before Paul Dance, the leader of Project 2025, resigned. Here with us now to unpack what the videos say and what would be signposts for a Trump presidency is ProPublica's Andy Kroll. Thank you for coming on with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm curious how much you think the Project 2025 team, the people working on this training video, felt that this would become the agenda of the Trump campaign, and how close, a Trump 2024 bid is with the Project 2025 agenda.
Well, I think there's no question that they hoped the policy playbook in the 900-page mandate for leadership, this document that's gotten so much attention and drawn so much criticism from both sides, I think they obviously hoped that would serve as a kind of roadmap for a future conservative administration and obviously now future Trump administration with him as the nominee. You just look at the authors of that document. There are, dozens and dozens of people who have worked for the former president, have connections to the former president. These videos are an interesting companion to that document. The big document is about policies, laying down what to do on everything from the Department of Education to Medicaid to healthcare to possibly reclassifying tens of thousands of civil servants. The training videos are meant to get people up to speed, people who are from outside Washington, up to speed, understanding the nuts and bolts of government, learning from past mistakes, the lessons, so on, of the first Trump administration, so that if Trump wins in November, there are these tens of thousands of people trained, ready to go on day one, which was not the case, obviously, when Donald Trump took office the first time around.
Can we be a little bit more specific about who these videos were intended for? Because they don't look like secret videos, is what I'm saying. They look, produced, that Heritage, whoever made them, which I'm assuming that's who made them here, wants people to see that. Was this for donors to see, look, this is what we're doing, this is the policy we're going to implement, this is why you support us? Was it actually geared for young people on the right who might be coming into the administration or be coming into Republican politics? What was their perspective on who they wanted to see these videos?
Yeah, based on all the reporting, it's the latter scenario that you just laid out. There is a whole part of Project 2025 called the Presidential Administration Academy. It is, a set of workshops. There are even take-home quizzes. There are, homework assignments that are all part of this academy that is intended for people who have shown an interest. They have to sign up through the Project 2025 website. There is a vetting process about whether they will be allowed into the academy, get access to the videos, get access to the worksheets, all the other resources that are included. And then it helps these people presumably who aren't steeped in the nuances of OIRA, as we heard from one of these videos, this sort of obscure but important regulatory agency, don't understand how a transition works. What's the difference between a beachhead team and a landing team? All of these kinds of things are probably new to many people who are watching from somewhere else outside of Washington and saying, oh, maybe I want to be an appointee in the next conservative administration. I want to work for Donald Trump. These videos are aimed at them. They are aimed at getting those people up to speed, both on, again, the mechanics of government, but then also some real substantive policy stuff like we saw in the video on climate, on abortion, on regulatory policy. There's a lot of, meat and potatoes in there as well that are, again, all trying to get people up to speed about what they would do if they were an appointee in a Trump administration starting in January of 2025.
Now, what, if anything, struck you in this 14 hours of footage? Something that caught my eye was teaching the viewers of this video how to engage with the media, what media sources to trust, how to work with the media was the title of it, with Alexei, World Tournist, and they talk about the modern media environment, how to navigate it, not to trust mainstream media, and to find conservative voices that you can trust. Was this something that struck you? And if not this, what is the most striking part of this 14-hour video you obtained?
Yeah, I think that the clip from Alexei Woltornis, the former press secretary, press officer in the Homeland Security Department, is interesting because you're hearing him say, in effect, if you're in the government, if you're working for, say, DHS, just don't bother with the mainstream media. Don't bother with the New York Times, the Washington Post, and so on. Just go straight to the outlets that we know, that we trust, that our people, sort of the Republican voters, the people who would have voted for Donald Trump, where they get their news. And, it's not ideally what you want to hear once they're in office. Hopefully an administration that says it represents all voters, even those who didn't vote for that president, still wants to reach all voters. So that caught our eye. That in some ways is kind of how Washington works. Not super surprising, but interesting. The clips about climate change, there's one in which a former Trump official says they need to eradicate, but future appointees need to eradicate all references to climate change. Obviously caught our eye if you care about climate change policy, clean energy, and so on. That same clip includes a mention of abortion as quote unquote murder, which obviously is a major issue in this election and it would be of interest to people watching these clips. The one last thing, though, I would say as well is, there's a video with a former high-up Trump official named Roger Severino, a really influential figure in the pro-life movement, in the Trump administration for sure. And that one is caught our eye because you really hear him talking through how, say, the next Trump administration can avoid the mistakes that the first one made, especially around passing new rules, passing regulations. The first Trump administration got sloppy, got caught in court. Severino is very sort of meticulous in explaining how to avoid that in the future when you're making policies in the federal government, which we found, it's very savvy, very strategic, quite interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is, like, as you're saying or alluding to, it's conservative policy, right? They want to implement conservative policy. A lot of conservatives are frustrated that Donald Trump failed to implement a lot of the policies that they thought they were bringing in for him to do last time around. For my own, I disagree with some of those policies. I agree with others. I don't want national federal abortion ban. Neither does Donald Trump, I don't think. I do like the idea of decreasing some of the regulatory muscle in the permanent federal bureaucracy. I guess the thrust of what I'm saying here, are these things actually being hidden? Are they making any... Conservatives are, maybe Donald Trump is because he doesn't say a lot specifically about policy, but broadly speaking, I think it should be obvious to most people that Republicans are getting behind Trump. They want to get him in office again so they can implement Republican policy to the best of their ability. That's not really different from what Democrats are doing or trying to do either.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I think that there's some substance in the video that pulls at that tension between what the Trump campaign has said and what this massive effort to support him and staff his future administration is doing. Obviously this reference to abortion as murder is complicated for the Trump campaign, to say the least. But a part of these videos, and again, the videos, we say they're never before published because they're not publicly available and they're not meant for public consumption. They're meant for people who have gone through this process. And for us, it's newsworthy to know, how are these potential appointees going into government, with what kind of training? What are they being, sort of steeped in? What are they being taught? And some of this is policy related, but I think as much of it as the videos show in the 14 hours that we have are lessons learned from the last Trump administration, a better understanding of how to deregulate and how to navigate the federal government. And that, to us, that's interesting. That's newsworthy. It's notable that they are trying to get this huge mass of future appointees really up to speed and understanding how this process works. So again, the agenda that Donald Trump would put into place on day one if he's elected in 2025, these, this army of political appointees underneath him would be ready and up to speed to do that as well. That's really the thrust, I would say, of Project 2025, the training piece of it. The policy piece of it, we'll see whether they embrace that, the Trump administration, if that is what happens. But these training videos are really interesting, as much for how sort of strategic they are and what they tell us about future appointees and what they're being trained on, as much as any particular one policy issue.
There was an interesting training on oversight and investigations. We had the American Accountability Foundation's Tom Jones on the show. He was on a panel with Mike Howell, who's the executive director of the Heritage Project's oversight project within the organization, or rather Heritage Foundation. I'm curious because that training seemed to be for political appointees on how to avoid investigation and oversight. The training included some advice around when to not put communications on paper and when to only have conversations over voice so that they could not be, recorded. It was essentially a training on how to avoid accountability as a public employee, which was concerning to me. I'm curious what you made of that part of this training.
Yeah, that training brought together three, I would say, of the kind of leading oversight investigators on the conservative side. You got Mike Howell, obviously, someone steeped in Trump administration and Capitol Hill experience. You've got Tom Jones, obviously one of the most prolific investigative figures on the conservative side, and then Michael Ding, who is with America First Legal, Stephen Miller's sort of newish outfit. Yeah, so these are guys who are lawyers in a few cases, and also just they know the ins and outs of oversight. And it isn't so much how to conduct oversight, but how to be a federal appointee and avoid having some embarrassing or sensitive email chain that you wrote with a colleague pop up in a congressional investigation, or have a news organization like ours FOIA and receive that, or one of these more partisan outfits. I think Tom references accountable.us, which is a sort of liberal leaning oversight group. It's an interesting kind of twist on this issue. They're taking their expertise and they are using it to help these future appointees not necessarily conduct oversight, but to not have embarrassing information come to light. And there's more in the clip as well, in this video as well. But I think it's just emblematic of how the expertise of all these different experts that appear in these videos, 36 of them, are brought to bear for these future appointees. And, again, you could say that they are, avoiding disclosing, or they're being coached on how to not put things in writing that would help the public, Congress, oversee their work. But you could also say there's some kind of strategy to this as well, that this is sort of Washington wisdom imparted on future appointees so they don't get themselves in hot water in the future. So there's a lot going on in this clip. But again, there is that sort of strategic side to it for sure.
Right. We recently saw a top deputy to Dr. Fauci who was, called before Congress caught having written emails with like deliberate misspellings and things like that to make them less subject to FOIA, all that kind of Washington insidery stuff that some of us would like to get rid of rather than teach the other side to do it expertly as well. Very interesting stuff. Andy, thanks so much for joining us. Always glad to have a fellow Wolverine on the show, Michigan Wolverine. So good to see you.
Thanks for having me, guys.